my name's Sasha Sethi from Asiamet's Investor Relations team, and I'm joined by Tony Manini, Asiamet's Executive Chairman, who in a short update video will provide some additional detail relating to today's announcement by Asiamet of the termination of the sale purchase agreement with Eternum Energy. So Tony, how do you feel about this and what's Asiamet's stance?
Yeah, thanks, Sasha. Well, I guess while we're disappointed that the deal with Eternum is not moving ahead, I'm looking at where we are as a business. It's a very strong copper environment. The copper price is sitting up around the sort of $3.60 mark, very different to where we've been in the last 4 or 5 years. The investor appetite for copper stories is strong. So while it's a hiccup in terms of the development path for KSK and the project, I'm still very positive given all the things that I just outlined. And we're in a good position. We've got very good assets. We're continuing to advance those assets towards development in a very strong market. We have development ready assets. So feeling very positive. As I said, Sasha, investment appetite is strong. We've had considerable inbound interest, both pre the discussions breaking down with Eternum and also immediately post that in the last few days. So I'm feeling very positive that we can continue to advance the projects and the business as we've been doing over the past few years, and get this project up and into development at this time.
Okay, Tony. So there's a lot to talk about here, and I'm sure lots of actions Asiamet are looking to take as well. But first, let's take the opportunity to address some of the questions which have been coming up regarding the deal, which are mostly centering around the delays to the SPA being signed, whether sufficient due diligence had been done, and escrow accounts as well. So potentially you could just go into some of those for us before outlining the further strategies.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Sasha. So look, I mean, in terms of, the background to this deal, maybe I'll just step through, really, I know there's been questions around this and questioning sort of the processes, but at the end of the day, we've approached this as we would approach any significant material deal that a public company enters into. So we've broken our diligence really down into 3 parts, what I call the past, the present, and the future. And while there's been, there's information floating around on social media in the public domain that make a good story, ultimately, as a business, we need to focus on the facts. So we've broken that down into a number of different components. Firstly, the financial due diligence, where we've reviewed the audited accounts of the counterparty, we've reviewed the management accounts of the counterparty, and satisfied ourselves that they were a going and credible concern. Secondly, there's commercial due diligence, where we've looked at the various aspects that were in place as it relates to contracts, as it relates to the validation of the financial models or the valuation models that have been provided to the independent valuers as part of this transaction. So verifying the merits of those and verifying the bona fides of the contracts, the contracts and the valuations that this whole deal centered around. So satisfying ourselves of that. And thirdly, really is the legal component. So where we really need to assess counterparty risk. We've done considerable amount of diligence on the counterparty here, both through the financials and commercials that I just outlined, but also, we've utilised, independent, global third-party firms to, undertake assessments of the counterparty and the associated risks with the counterparty. So we've done a pretty comprehensive diligence in the background over a considerable period of time. And as I said, both using our internal resources, but also external and independent resources. As with every deal, there's counterparty risk. When we look at this deal, as I said, we've been through an extensive due diligence period. When we entered into this transaction with Eternum Energy, they paid, the funds in on time in relation to that. We've been very deliberate in the way that we've structured the SPA such that there was no equity transfer at any time prior to the IPO. So unless the deal completed in its entirety, there was no equity transfer. And that's been a very deliberate strategy from a commercial and legal perspective to protect our own position in the event that something didn't go right. As ultimately happened here with this announcement today. So, Sasha, I think we've done a lot of work internally, as I've outlined, to satisfy ourselves that of the bona fides of this transaction from a commercial, legal, and counterparty risk perspective. I should also mention, just in finishing on that topic, that as part of the process for this deal, it had to go to a shareholder vote. It's a material deal and had to go to a shareholder vote, as everybody knows. The Nomad, as the regulator for the company, had to go through a reasonableness assessment of this transaction on behalf of shareholders. So they, have independently reviewed the deal from a legal and financial perspective, the bona fides of the deal and the bona fides of the valuations and etc. That would lead into the ultimate commercial deal once the IPO had been completed. So, there's been a regulatory process that we've had to go through to get to this point as well. So, from a diligence perspective, from a satisfying ourselves on counterparty risk, and from a regulatory perspective, it's been quite rigorous. So, I think, all of those things need to be considered when people are commenting or thinking about, why we got to this point and how's the deal fallen apart. I should also just add lastly that I know, I think, from your feedback that there's been questions around escrow and matters associated with things like that. Look, typically in a deal like this, what I would call the deposit ultimately comes when you've got a signed share sale and purchase agreement, an SPA. We entered that on the 24th of December, and the initial $2.5 million payment was really that initial deposit, which would secure the deal and then take the deal forward. Now, subsequently, we had a 10 business day period for that to be paid. Late in the piece, Eternum approached us to renegotiate the binding SPA after the 10-day period had lapsed, or sort of immediately prior to the 10-day period lapsing. We subsequently responded to that, we wouldn't be reopening the SPA, and the SPA stood, and requested that the payment be made, and subsequently the payment wasn't made by the time frame that we'd given them, and unfortunately we've got to this position today where the payment hasn't been made. But typically that payment would be the payment, like when you buy a house, Sasha, you sign a purchase agreement and you pay your deposit. That's essentially where we got to. The deposit wasn't paid. Now, I know I know this deal has taken, a bit longer than anticipated, but, it needs to be remembered that we are working to, COVID is real. It does impact upon day-to-day business, and certainly it impacts upon the ability to have face-to-face discussions, frank discussions with people. I know there's lots you can do over Zoom and it can fast-track things, but at the end of the day, it's very important in the face-to-face context. So that has impacted the deal. And as we said in previous announcements, we've been very much impacted by, people being ill related to COVID. And we've had, some of our key people on the deal have had COVID and have been seriously ill with COVID. So there's a number of sort of reasons, but I mean, typically these deals take 3 to 6 months to consummate in any sense. So, it has taken us a bit longer because of that, but ultimately, that's unfortunately the deposit wasn't paid. It's not called a deposit, but the first tranche 1A payment, effectively a deposit, was not paid, and we, as a consequence, have found them to be in breach and terminated as of the last Friday.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so not moving forward with the Turnham now, and I guess progressing BKM as a starter project for the KSK portfolio has always been a key part of the strategy. So what's the strategy here now? Well,
Sasha, the strategy hasn't changed. As I said, what has changed, and I think this needs to be sort of, considered, and why I'm very confident that, we can push ahead and push ahead hard, is that the copper price environment has changed. So, you see it in the news every day. You see that there's a lot of investor interest and appetite in copper stories. And we have one of the few development-ready copper assets in the Asian region. So the strategy hasn't changed. We'll be pushing ahead. I think the important thing to consider here is that throughout this process, we have continued to work on the project and advance the project as we otherwise would have. We haven't put down tools waiting for this deal to get consummated or completed. We've actually pushed ahead and done the things that were needed to be done and intended to be done. So the permitting has continued. We've reported on the milestones related to the permitting, and that work continues. It's a very extensive and significant piece of work to get any project ready for construction and development. The second piece is really on the technical side, and we've had Andrew Neil, who we announced leading up the technicals. Andrew's been doing a lot of the engineering work, which is really centered around significantly improving the economics of the project. We've already got a robust project. We've reported on the numbers. We've got $125 million NPV, a 19.9% IRR. We've always said that work was to enhance the economics. I think there's a couple of key takeaways, and Andrew's pulling together all the reports from the consultants as we speak, and we'll be reporting on that shortly. But one of the key things we were looking to do was increase the overall copper recoveries. Overall copper recoveries from circa around about 50% total. So this is not the recoverable copper, but 50% total copper recoveries up to somewhere around the 80% copper recovery. So that's on total copper content. So we've done a lot of work around that. We've got some good results. We'll report on that shortly, as I said. But I think, the context here is if you couple significantly better copper recoveries over the life of the asset together with a copper price which is substantially above the copper price that we did we reported the studies at, which was $3.25 copper. We're sitting today at $3.60 to $3.70. If we plug those spot numbers in, if we plug in significantly improved copper recoveries, what we're going to see is a longer mine life and substantially better economics. So we're going to have a much improved and a more robust project. We're going to start now re-engaging with banks. We're going to start re-engaging, with potential offtake partners and various other people that are components of any project financing. I think importantly, as I said, the strategy hasn't changed. So we will continue to talk to various potential partners for the project, credible people that have got a background in the industry. We'll, look at other options for a partial or full sale of the project if the valuations make sense. And, we'll potentially look at, an IPO of the asset in its own right on another market if that recognises full value for the project. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to, what we'll continue to do is push the project towards production, and at the same time, look at what's the optimum way to get value, get the best value, for the project, for the business and for our shareholders. And, that's ultimately, as a board, what our objectives have always been. I think right now, I'm pretty, upbeat because the environment is so much better than it has been at any time in the past 4 to 5 years that we've been actually working on this particular project and doing all the things that we've been reporting on along the way. So, the last piece I should just add, Sasha, is that, and I did touch on this at the start, was that, we've actually had, since copper's really picked up, we've had quite a lot more interest in what we're doing from a range of investors. And immediately sort of people have been watching what's happening with this transaction because there's very few, development or near development ready copper projects around, as I said. So people are watching what we're doing here. And we've had some inbounds, from people that are interested in potentially investing in the company or in the project just in the last few days. So, I'm confident that, we'll be able to, continue with our strategy. I think the environment's much more conducive to actually, being able to push this forward quickly now. And, I'm very confident with all of those things in mind that we'll be able to execute. I should just mention that, as part of that now push towards project funding, project financing, and all the things that come in the late stages of getting a project ready for financing and construction, we'll be looking to, obviously strengthen up the board and the management team further. We've been, we've put the CEO search on hold for a period of time while we've been working on this transaction, and particularly during the COVID period. I mean, it's been, nobody's been able to travel, and, it's particularly hard to attract someone to a business when you can't meet face to face. They can't visit they haven't been able to visit the site or the operations, etc. So we've had that on hold. We'll press the button now on, getting a CEO in place to lead the company through this next, important phase, strengthen up, the management team further as it relates to a project development, and also likewise the board, get some additional experienced project development type people on the board, as well as people that have had, Indonesian exposure and experience. I think it's quite, critical to have that, given, the cultural overlay that we have in a business context in Indonesia. So all of those things, we'll be working flat out on to get in place. And as I said, I'm very confident that, while this is an unfortunate circumstance, we've got to this position with Eternum and things haven't worked out. And as a consequence, we've had to terminate the SPA. We'll certainly, be pushing ahead very hard, as we always have been, and confident that we can deliver on this project as has been our strategy for a number of years.
Okay, thanks, Tony. So you're re-engaging old conversations. You're going to engage some of these new conversations and the inbound interest that you've had as well since we've announced that we're stepping away. But just to take a step back for a second, I think it'd be good to remind investors of the KSK portfolio and how the BKM copper project fits into this as a whole, as a starter copper project, but also how the value enhancement work you just referred to fits into all this as well, please.
Yeah, okay. So, so for those unfamiliar with the story, Sasha, we've got two projects. We've got the KSK project in Kalimantan, which is essentially what we've been talking about today on the call. That project is a circa 25,000 tonne per annum SX-EW copper project, which we've taken through full feasibility study. We're now undertaking the value enhancement or the front-end engineering work that typically takes place prior to a project financing or during a project financing in a mining project. So that work has been undertaken. So post the feasibility study, looking at various aspects where the economics of the project can be made more robust. As I said during the interview, we already have a very robust project. This is about making it fundamentally stronger and getting the best we can in terms of financial returns out of the project as part of leading into a project financing and working with the banks. And banks, typically, look at, all aspects of the project and are looking to ultimately, how sound is this project? What is the certainty of me getting my money back? And that's why these value enhancements leading into, optimising the economics is critically important leading into project financing. That's how banks view it, and all banks view it that way. That's the debt side. There's an equity side, which, we are looking to address through, the partnering objectives, the IPO, and the various other bits and pieces that I just talked about. But, in addition to the KSK project, we also have a very large porphyry project called Butong. Butong is at a much earlier stage than the KSK project, which is, as I just said, almost development ready. The Butong project has had an initial concept study done on it. It's a large porphyry project. It has around 2.5 million tonnes of contained copper and about the same amount of gold. So large project, very good infrastructure. It's in Aceh province, but it's at an earlier stage. So, we're looking at various options. We haven't had the opportunity over the past few years where we've been concentrating on the smaller KSK project to get it into development. We haven't had the opportunity to do a lot of work on Butong. We are now doing the background work in terms of the community engagement and getting things sort of in place, ready to initiate further work on that project. It still requires a significant amount of technical work in terms of drilling, metallurgical study work, and various other study pieces. And in a much stronger copper environment such as this, it's important we daylight Butong as a pretty significant opportunity, but it's further down the track. So I think, Sasha, in summary, we've got a near-term development ready project. We've got a very large project which has huge value in terms of its contained metal of copper and gold, and we're looking at various options for that project as well, how to best advance that both in our own right and potentially with partners. So all of that happening at the moment.
So final message to investors looking in, are we going to be able to move forward from this or not?
Well, I mean, absolutely is the answer. I mean, as I just alluded to, I mean, it's a setback, but then I just reiterate, the environment is so much better than it ever has been in the past 5 years for a company with copper assets as we have, development ready, near-term copper asset at KSK, and a very large inventory of copper and gold sitting at Butong. We're extremely well placed given the environment that we're in. Copper price is strong, the investor sentiment strong. It's a setback, it's a hiccup, but we've got a number of options coming at us, and I'm very confident that with this much more positive environment, Sasha, that we'll be able to execute on our plans pretty rapidly. So, we'll get over this and go on to bigger and better things. I'm happy that, to be honest, I'm happy that we will, given the environment that we're now in versus what we were in when we entered this arrangement, potential arrangement with AE back in March. Let's not forget, in March, the markets were in free fall. The copper price was $2.10. We're now 9 months on from that. We're in a buoyant market, and there's a lot more appetite for the types of things we're doing. So yes, I'm very confident that it's great that we've still got 100% of the project in an environment like this to move forward.
Thanks very much, Tony. Look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thanks, Sasha. Hopefully that interview today, or the discussion today, fills a few gaps for people, and absolutely looking forward to going on to bigger and better things. Thanks for the time. Cheers.